Started with our first panelist, and I'm really thrilled to introduce Lon, who's a good friend of mine here. We happen to both live in the city of Atlanta, Georgia, in the southeast of the United States. And Lon was born in Vietnam. We'll take a look at her picture now, and she's a founder and president of Lead Across Cultures. That's the name of her company. International. She's a seminar leader and a real expert on cross-cultural competence and global leadership development. She also, I'm very excited to announce, has a new book out, which I read and I loved. It's a 36 Ancient Chinese Strategies for Modern Business, a very practical book and highly readable with lots of stories in it and cases. And she's also been featured on the Finance Business News Channel, the Vietnam Investment Review, Entrepreneur Magazine, and makes many trips back and forth from her native country back here to the U.S. as she does work over there. So I couldn't be more thrilled to introduce Lon. And Lon, I'm going to ask you to start the program with your presentation, and we all are interested in hearing what you have to say.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you. Good morning, good night, and good evening to everybody in the world. So what does it take for a leader to succeed in today's global 21st century economy? With the time we have, I will focus on understanding the cultural barriers and how to overcome them. So in the year 2000, I woke up to a freezing Ohio winter. So it was my first family get-together with my in-laws who came from Boston, New York, and Cleveland. And I came from the South. And that's the South of Vietnam. My first impression was like constant chain of noise, wet kisses, and tight hugs, people constantly talking, asking me questions, but never giving me a chance to get a word in edgewise. So, you know, I had to listen to 3, 4 people talking at the same time, and it did not enhance my comfort level. And later, my in-laws asked my husband, Lan seemed very quiet. Is she okay? So look at this picture. This is where I came from Vietnam. So in Vietnamese culture, in particular, and in Asian culture in general, silence is valued. Silence is thinking and deliberation, and silence is gold. So I was taught not to cut people off when somebody's talking and wait for my turn. Well, I have learned pretty quickly that in waiting for my turn may never come. I have learned that silence is not always appreciated in America. In fact, that often is inferred as incompetence, non-commitment, and lack of confidence. So in the next slide, you will see why do we behave differently. On the left, you see open space, cold. And on the right, you see hot and tight space. One sparsely populated and the other densely populated. One is quiet and one is noisy. One leads to individualism and the other to togetherness. One breeds independence and the other to interrelatedness. So I will show you a chart about culture. What is culture in the next slide? In the black box underneath, you will see culture is the assumptions, expectation, attitude, perceptions, and values and beliefs that are formed in the family we are raised, influenced by the environment we are in the organization we belong to, we work for, and in the nation where we live in. They are hidden just as the root of a tree, as you can see here. We cannot see them, but they are manifested through symbols like how we look, how we dress, how we communicate, work, learn, how we make decisions, and how we build relationships. In the next slide, you will see this is a very, it's a real story. You may all experience that. In a, annual sales meeting, the American manager suggests to the team to recruit a new distributor and let go Mekong Delta distributor because looking at the numbers, this year they don't make the numbers, the sales numbers. And he asked the team for their opinion. And the Vietnamese managers respectfully listen and subtly tell the boss that he should consider keeping Mekong Delta distributor because they have been with the company from day one, from the day when they had a little tiny representative office, and today the company has 700 employees. And than that, they have built a strong relationship and trust with Mekong Delta distributor. Well, the American manager is not convinced because looking at the figures, he is looking for some quantitative analysis when the Vietnamese manager is providing qualitative, intuitive explanation. And both are frustrated. So we will talk a little bit later how we go about this more effectively. In the next slide, you will see, as the story I just told you, you could tell the American managers command democracy, strive for bottom line result, and do not hesitate to express his own opinion. He wants to solve the problem. Whereas the Vietnamese managers respect hierarchy and order very subtly, even though they don't agree with the manager, but they certainly express their opinion and strive for harmony. And because at the end of the day, to them, they value relationship with the manager, relationship with the distributor that they don't want to let go. In the next slide, you will see, on the left, you can tell which one is from a democratic culture and which one is from a hierarchical culture. On the left, you will see, staff and supervisors are considered almost as equal, and they make decisions together. On the right, there is a large authority and respect. There is a large gap. The staff expect to be told what to do. They have a higher respect to the supervisor and sometimes consider him or her as an authority, a father, mother figure who is expected to be right and make the right decision almost all the time. Let's see how we communicate in the next slide. Okay, so in the West, in a more direct culture, a no is a no, right? And make it short. And whereas you see in Vietnamese culture or in Asian in general, we communicate a little tiny bit different. As you can see, it will show up. It's a little bit slow. Yeah, see, it's very different. So instead of saying no, we say maybe next time, even though sometimes that next time will never come. And let's see how we handle conflict in the next slide. It's the same, right? You can guess which style is preferred in direct Western culture and which one is preferred by indirect and Asian Vietnamese culture. And in the next slide, you will see the differences between individualism and collectivism. Just one word, one culture strives to be different. The other culture strive to conform. So the next part I would like to share with you, the question is, so what is the most effective leadership style? Well, there is no universally agreed upon definition of a perfect leadership style. The best way is to think about what a leader does. Don't you agree with me that as a leader, we influence the behavior of others to achieve a common goal? And in the context of today, global economy, being influential is the key element of achieving success. In order to do that, we make situational choices regardless of our dominant style or our dominant cultural style. This slide right here in front of you, I wrote in my book, The 36 Ancient Chinese Strategies for Modern Business. It's in chapter 5, strategy 26. This is for Westerners and those who work with Vietnamese or Asian people. Be mindful of face. What does it mean? The concept of face has its Confucius root in Eastern cultures, including China, Taiwan, Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. It's very important. It represents honor, reputation, prestige, pride, and dignity. And be mindful of the face helps to manage the delicate interaction balance of pride, humiliation, shame, and honor. So, we basically we say, I translate from Vietnamese and Chinese pretty much. Maybe for Westerner it's a little bit hard for you to capture, but like keep face, save face, and give face. Be sensitive, and you need to be more an active listener. Don't try to dominate a conversation all the time, but invite people to share with you their opinions. Ask them questions so that they can participate. Because people like me may wait for their turn, but for you, for example, you may think, okay, they don't say anything, so I just keep on going. And the last two elements, build relationships and demonstrate true compassion, is very important. We all know, yes, it's all business, but to win the hearts and minds of your people, especially when you work with Vietnamese and Asian, we need to understand them from a personal level. Yes, I said personal level. In Chinese, we always say, quan si. What is going on in their life? For example, one co-worker whose father just passed away, one employee whose daughter just got married, uh, a co-worker whose son just has been sick and hospitalized. You have to ask them, show them that you care. That is so important. In the next slide, I would like to share with my Vietnamese audience today, and could be related to Asian audience too, that of course we have the Confucius, Buddhist, and Taoist, Laoist influence to us. Harmony, compassion, relationship is the value, the righteous thing to us. And however, it could be carried away. So at some point we draw a line, we separate business people from the issue, and we learn to be more openly express opinions and points of view, but we cannot rely on only nonverbal, intuitive understanding. And when we express ourselves with evidence, facts, figures, and well-planned proposal. And again, I can never stress this enough. This is pretty new to our culture, but we have to be prepared for upfront challenges, criticism, and feedback, especially for constructive and corrective feedback. Because without that, we can never elevate to excellence. In the last slide, I would like to sum up. Let's look at the top, the continuum on the top. Where are you on that continuum? All the way to the left, all the way to the right, somewhere in the middle? What do you want to do more? Do less, or stop doing, so that you could be a more effective leader? For example, for me, I am Vietnamese. I live in America. I work with people globally. I treasure my Vietnamese cultural value. I do. In the meantime, I spend time to understand what holds me back, the weak spots of my own cultural style. Then, I stretch a little bit, get out of my comfort zone, flex my style, expand my repertoire of skills and behaviors every time I engage in a new interaction. Is it hard? Is it easy to do? No, it's not. But by practice, we will get better, and we will feel very confident wherever we are and in different situations. With that, I would like to conclude my presentation, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Lon. That was fantastic. And I think your message is to all of us that we need to flex our styles. I think we had a couple of questions come in here, and Kat, you had some as well, but I'll start it off here and then ask Kat to pull them in. Um, One question is, how do you encourage innovation if people are in a hierarchical culture? If you mentioned the mom and the dad, I think they were meaning that. Are people encouraged to offer new ideas?
Can you say it again? So what do you mean by
Yeah,
that,
so
Jennifer?
if in the Vietnamese culture you were mentioning and describing the hierarchical culture, and I think the person was saying, how does that work to encourage new ideas?
Right,
If can
right.
people speak up and express themselves? I think that's what they're meaning there.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
Sure.
Um, that has been a deeply rooted culture, and again, coming from Confucius philosophy. And it's good in a way, it's especially in the old days, to keep the society in order. For nowadays, where every time I have a chance to speak with young leaders, I always tell them that, we have to exert to our critical thinking. As you said, uh, the hierarchical prevents us from being innovative because we strive to conform, and that could lead to group thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and that is not a good thing. So I'm a little bit, maybe I think I'm a little bit radical, but I challenge that in our own value system. Uh, that, at home, in the family, yes, respect to, your father, mother, or seniority, but at work, it's a different field. And I always encourage all the young emerging leaders to think about that.
Thank you. Thank you. And I know, Don, you may have had a question you wanted to throw in there as well. Another one that came in is, how are Vietnamese different than other Asian people? Are there any subtle differences, or what would you just say in that regard?
Oh, absolutely. Right here, I try to simplify it, but of course, every culture, even, in America, we have very different regional, like people from New York is different from people from Georgia, in
Yes.
Vietnam. For example, I would say Vietnamese are very different from Chinese in, many ways and are similar in many ways. I would say, let's talk about in the work setting. If you see in a meeting, uh, you have Vietnamese working with Singaporean or Malaysian, for example, you will see that Vietnamese are a little bit more reserved because we have a stronger Confucius influence, and because of the language barrier for Malaysian Singaporeans, for example, or Filipinos, they have the opportunity to learn English at a very young age, just like their second language. For Vietnamese, it still is a foreign language, and that could be a big barrier in, the English proficiency could be a, one of the key elements that hold a lot of leaders back when they try to
Mm,
express themselves, because they have to think about that when they
yes.
speak.
Yes. And so the English they don't get as much a chance to practice, I found when I was over there as well. Has that been your experience?
Yes, absolutely. Because it is in our educational system. It's still a foreign language. We don't have many hours at school to speak English, and everything is still in Vietnamese. Whereas in
Yes.
other, in Malaysia, Singapore, the Philippines, they learn
Yes, and
everything
it's
in
funny
English.
because I was going to say many of us who have traveled over there have been so interested in trying to learn some Vietnamese words, but we don't get much of a chance because everybody wants to practice English
Right,
when they talk
exactly.
with us, right? So,
Right.
yeah, here's another question. I'm confident, Lon, when dealing with my domestic team. However, when working in a regional, I guess that's a global environment, I tend to be less dynamic and confident, especially in meetings. Do you have any suggestions for me to
Yeah,
be? Yes.
yeah, this relates to the answer I just answered you before. One of the key barrier is the English proficiency. We could speak English well, but not that often and fluently enough that that give you the confidence to just say whatever you want, right there on the top of your mind. You have to think about it to make sure grammatically correct and all of that. And secondly, because of the reserved culture, and we are taught at a very young age that you think 10 times before you speak. And like, if you don't have anything, you have to make sure it's right. And you know how right is right? It's hard, but that's how we are taught. And then just we are very careful before we say anything. And again, I always tell my audience and participants in every training opportunity that you cannot be afraid to make mistakes when you speak,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm.
Because you wait till it's perfect, then the opportunity will pass by you, and you will not have a chance. So that could hold back. So a few techniques I would like to share. For example, in a meeting, uh, to show that you are engaged and committed, and you cannot be there and be silent all the time and passively listen, but you can ask questions like piggyback on some ideas.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, that could be the easiest ways, and then from there, it will open your mind to new thoughts. Then you can go after that with more ideas and answers and contribution. But at first, if you don't have anything to say, you can ask questions.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And then you look engaged is what you're saying.
Exactly.
You might even plan your questions out ahead of time so you can practice them if you want to gain your confidence.
Right. For example, very simple questions such as, tell me more about this, or please elaborate more on this,
Yes,
point. Some of
yes.
those are like just very safe, easy to use every time, everywhere.
Yes, and I can say that you do that very well. I've heard you do that in meetings. So so another great question here. The person says, "Hi all, I'm glad to be here. I'm interested to hear more about what quote harmony looks like in Vietnam. I suspect it looks differently or different from what harmony looks like in the US." So Alon, could you speak to that for a minute? What does harmony look like? I think you had that in one of your slides.
Okay. Harmony here means relationship, trust. Those are the relationship, trust,
Uh-huh.
quansi. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
quansi. That means that you don't uh, it's just you try to make sure that there's no conflict. That could be there's some how to say downside there, and yeah, no confrontation, conflict, and
Mm-hmm.
do
Mm-hmm.
good keep harmony and build a trust, and that is the essence, the core of the word harmony.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
So perhaps not different too much from what we might say here. It's just lack of
Right.
conflict is what you're saying, as I was hearing it. Okay, wonderful. And would you please share some of your experience in handling conflict, somebody else wrote, across Asian and Western styles? We
Oh,
can handle
great.
speak, yeah, because
Okay.
that kind of feeds right from that question about, harmony and
Yeah,
now
yeah. Can you
conflict.
please go back? Can you please go back to the handling conflict style? The slide with the, let me see. No, I think you have to go. Yeah, further, please. Yes, right
Oh
there.
yeah,
Thank you. Go back.
after communicate, there it is.
Right.
No, that's face. I
Go
think
back, please.
it's
One
after
more.
the communication side, but that's okay. You can
One more,
it's
please.
before, yeah, one more
Before
back.
before this one,
One more
please.
back, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Kat. Okay. So we look here. Um, in the West, it's about results, right? Bottom line results. So people are not afraid to confront, to compete, to tear things apart so that they can solve the problem. On the right, you will see because of the harmony, value, and all of that, when we solve a problem, we can go for like avoid it, go around it, accommodate, and those are the contrasts between the two cultures. Of course,
Mm-hmm.
in a perfect world, collaborate, which is in the middle, would be great. But when you talk about the preference or tendencies, you will see confront and compete in the Western culture. On the right, you will see more like avoidance, accommodating, and yeah. Do I answer that question?
Oh, yes, I believe so. And that person can certainly can respond if they have more questions regarding that.
Sure,
But
sure.
yeah, but I think a lot of your dynamics that you described about the cultures does feed into conflict too, and sort of the everybody getting along and the silence. So that can all feed into that as well. Okay, wonderful. So did you also, I think before we close this out, I think you did have a poll that you had suggested we might take. Is that one you want to throw in now before we move on to Don? It might be interesting to see what the audience thinks.
Sure, sure. If yeah, that would be great. Let's do that, Kat.
So that's that first poll question, Kat. We've got Kat working hard here behind the scenes. She's handling lots, so thank you all for your participation. This is what we want. We don't want this to be all lecture, so there are several questions I haven't gotten to yet, but so appreciate you guys doing that. Ah, here it is.
Okay, it's just to make a little bit more interactive for everybody. Can everybody please participate? Okay. So which of the followings are forms of person's culture? Oh, I think we missed one. The last one is all. You can there must be another one, but it's missed here. It's not here. I'm sorry that it says that please select one, but actually you can select all or one or two or three or all of them.
I think it may be set up to select one, so we'll just see what people think is the main
Right.
one. Maybe we can
Yeah.
change adapt the question. We're all about adaptation here, right?
Yeah. So this
Okay,
is
so
for
the
you.
answers are coming in. The answers are coming in now. Yeah.
Yeah, remember you can select 2, 3, or select all.
So which of the following forms a person's culture?
While that's happening, Lon, this is Don Mariska. I just wanted to comment that while you're describing the differences between Vietnamese and Western cultures and approaches, what really struck me very recently at being at a conference called Wisdom 2.0 with the Vice President of People Operations for Google and executives from Facebook and Twitter and other places, is how much they're embracing Eastern approaches.
That's great.
Meditation, silence, harmony, ideas like holacracy, which is having the organizations work together. In essence, there's a movement towards the very cultural values that you were highlighting as differentiating Vietnamese from typical Western approaches. So I think especially as China and Vietnam and other India and other cultures become more ascendant in their economic power, we're
Right,
likely to
right.
see more and more of the things that you're talking about really being incorporated for their good value and because of the changing dynamics that are occurring in modern economic and social relationships.
You're right. Yeah, thank you for sharing. It's great to hear that. Okay, here. So what do you think, Jennifer and Don? What are your answers? I would like just to ask you.
Well, I think I'd certainly say that family is a strong influence. If the opportunity had been there, I would have checked them all off. I think family frames, for many of us, our early perspectives and how we approach things. And if we're cognizant of that, I think that's a main factor.
Yeah, I would agree. Family and nation to me, certainly it starts, families have their own cultures, don't they? As you saw in your Ohio winter, right, Lon? Compared to that in Vietnam. Yeah, we learn our messages early, and I think our cultural influences are very strong, as you've been describing with Vietnam. So, yeah,
Right,
I think
right,
it's really interesting to even just to become aware of these influences make a difference in how we function, because then we can decide, as you had very well suggested, to push yourself out of some of those ways of behaving that might just be intuitive, that you don't think much about but aren't that effective. And at the same time, keep those things that are working. But just the awareness to me is key.
right, right, absolutely. Um, if we put them in percentage, this is the right answer. And I apologize if for some reason the last one with the all, you can click on
Yeah,
that. The two all is not there. The right answer is all of them.
that's
Yeah,
the correct answer.
yeah, the
Okay.
correct answer is all. We
All
are,
right.
organization, we work for organization we belong to, the nation we live in, the family where we are raised, traditions and philosophies, all of that form a
Wonderful.
person's culture.
Yeah, well, it kind of made for a different, interesting look at this too, another slice on the data. So thank you so much. We're gonna wind up Lon's formal presentation. She's certainly going to be answering questions and involved in the discussion, but I'm going to keep it moving as the facilitator here. And I want to thank you so much, Lon, for your terrific input. You're definitely our subject matter expert on Vietnam,
Thank
and
you. I had a
you
blast. Thank you so much.
you're even teaching us a few words. So, okay, so we're going to move on to Dawn Maruska, who is I'm thrilled to have on the panel with us tonight. And if we could just get that slide up with Don's lovely photo and his description. I know there's a little bit of a delay, so I'm going to start reading and telling you briefly about Don. Don earned his MBA and law degrees from Stanford University out in California. He founded and was CEO of 3 Silicon Valley companies, that's also in California, that many of you have probably heard of, and received a National Innovator Award. Don is also a master certified coach to leaders and teams in all over Asia. He's been over there many times and around the globe. His clients include many companies, but also Accenture, Intel, Microsoft, and Wells Fargo Bank. So without further ado, let me turn the mic over to Don, and I'm so looking forward to what you have to say tonight, Don.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Xin chào. It's a pleasure to be with you this evening and this morning in Vietnam. It's been exciting to visit Vietnam, Cambodia, and other areas of Southeast Asia and to work with people throughout the region. It's an exciting, dynamic culture to me. It's one that I think demonstrates a work ethic, a commitment to resilience that is just truly phenomenal. So I feel that it's an honor to be talking with you this evening, and I welcome your questions along the way. Because wherever we are, we found that whether it's Southeast Asia or Silicon Valley, that as we see on the next slide, there's a huge amount of untapped talent. Not just among people who are underemployed or unemployed, but even the best and the brightest in Silicon Valley in excellent organizations report that 30 to 40% of their talent is untapped. We see this not only in Silicon Valley, but Southeast Asia and around the globe as a huge opportunity for individuals and for our economies to tap more effectively. So we want to talk about what it is that you can do in practical terms yourself with your own initiative and people that you work with to make the most of your talent and have fun doing it. Because as we see on the next slide, there's a very close correlation. This is actual data from a high-tech company across their leadership group. There's a very close correlation between the use of talent and levels of satisfaction in the job. So people who use more of their talent are more satisfied with their work. So this really invites us to think about what it is that gets in the way of using our talent and what can we do to change that to work more effectively. And as we see, the most important factor here in getting in the way of talent is fear, and that's depicted in the next slide that addresses what the human brain looks like when someone is feeling fearful, when they're worried about, what's going to happen, when they're concerned about whether they're going to succeed or not. That the green arrow there points to an area that's highly activated in the brain. This is a positron emission tomography scan. It's some of the latest neuroscience, which is very fascinating because we're getting to see how people think and what happens to their brain as they're actually going about tasks and doing things. And that's the amygdala, or the limbic brain. It fires down and shoots the adrenaline into the system. But what it does even more significantly is it diminishes the brain activity where you see the red arrows. The red arrows are areas of diminished brain activity, and that's the frontal lobes and the cerebral cortex, the very parts of our brain that are able to do our most creative thinking. So we have brains that are kind of wired and pre-programmed to respond to the challenging situations we face in ways that rob us of our best creativity. So this is a huge dynamic that's occurring, and is the thing that we most need to overcome if we're going to be using our talent more effectively. So what we've done is depicted on the next slide is really take these insights from neuroscience and the latest psychology work like of Carol Dweck on mindset out of Stanford and others, and then decades of experience in coaching people in various cultural and organizational settings to figure out, okay, what's the way to break through these typical patterns of thinking that are self-limiting? And what is it that can be done to help people accomplish extraordinary things with their talent that fulfill them at a personal level? So the take charge of your talent approach, which we see following here, depicts really three transformations that are critical, and they relate to the three keys that we outline in the book. And the first one is to go from being a victim to being a hero. So many times we view ourselves as victims of circumstance. I could be doing wonderful things, but the economy is down, my company doesn't have a budget, my co-workers are envious, my boss won't give me a chance, I get passed over for people that are less qualified. All those sorts of things, which, however true they may be, have the net result of us being victims rather than heroes. So the first thing to do is to figure out how do we switch from being a victim to a hero, and we're going to talk about that in a couple of moments. The second transformation here is how do we shift obstacles into opportunities? How do we actually use obstacles not just as things to struggle with and overcome, but actually as vehicles to accelerate our progress? I'm going to give you a concrete example of how you can use an obstacle to actually accelerate the opportunities that you face and can pursue. And the third is how do we convert the things we have in our head into some assets, something tangible that's going to be valuable and effective in what we do. So the next slide depicts some of the dozens of places that we've been involved in doing this work in local government, in international companies, in different parts of the world. We've been in 13 countries doing this, including those of Asia and the sub-Asian continent, and then as well in the public sector and other places. So what I want to do is do a quick poll with you that's on the next page here. If Kat, you can launch that, to find out what do you want. And you can click on all those that apply to you. So if you launch that poll, Kat, we'll see what people say are the things that they're looking for and what they'd like to have in their careers. Is that talent? Whoops. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So again, whoops, it's constraining you to just pick one. So again, that was supposed to be letting people click on all that apply. So you'll just have to pick the one that's most important to you. Again, we're adaptively managing here. But let's just see what people say about that topic. What it is that you're looking for about your talent, your career, and things that are important to you. What would be most important in this? And then that'll help guide how I'll allocate the remaining bits of time that I have to address what's most of interest to your audience. and how
Don,
that can
this is Jennifer. I
work.
just wanted to ask you, in your experience in working with these companies and certainly in their Asian locations as well, have you noticed any trends regarding some of the themes that you've described already regarding talent and creative thinking? Has anything come to mind for you in your experience in working with Asian people?
Sure, well, absolutely. There's a tremendous work ethic that Asians have. I think they, in the India, China, other places that Singapore, et cetera. Um, and I think there's been a real interest in figuring out how do they present that. It goes back to what Lon was talking about, really. How do they present that? How do they sort of get forward what they can offer? And how to do that. In fact, it's been very interesting doing it cross-culturally, where they do that with people from South America or from Chicago or from, San Francisco or wherever, and to see the sort of differences, both the discomfort and also ultimately the growth that people have when they see, um, gosh, they can find some ways to boost their talent, share with others what they know, and do that in a way that works for them personally and culturally. So I'm wondering what the results are here. Whoops. Oh, there we are. So turning obstacles into opportunities is a big one here. So okay, I will allocate the time accordingly, and I don't have a lot, but we'll get into this and jump along here. So thank you very much for responding. So let's look at the first key here, which is the power up your talent story. This is dealing especially with the issue of how to go from being a victim to a hero. This is one of my favorite photos from Vietnam, the juxtaposition of modern cars, people on motorbikes, and buildings of all types. And it really shows the dynamism of the Vietnamese culture, which I really love. The key thing, as we see on the next page here, is how do we create a story for ourselves, right? We think of talent as a story, and we're writing the next chapter in that story. And the idea is, how can you write the chapter so that you come out as a hero? And if you think about hero stories in any culture, really, and Joseph Campbell was great in this in what he calls the monomyth of the hero. That is, across cultures, there's a shared understanding of what heroes do, and heroes have hopes. They pursue opportunities and overcome the obstacles along the way, and they take actions that enable them to keep that cycle moving forward. So this is actually a culturally shared understanding of what it is to have ourselves be heroes. Now, we might not be heroes in a physical sense of, being able to battle giants, but we can be heroes in the sense of our talent and what we're doing with our talent for ourselves and for others. So how do we shift, and that's what we'll look at next. Next slide here is, how do we shift from being a victim to a hero? What we found is critical is have someone who is a talent catalyst. Now, I don't know how well catalyst translates into Vietnamese, and Lon, if you know the translation for it, just speak up. But it's the idea of something that stimulates a reaction, precipitates a result, accelerates something that occurs. So since we each live in our own little story, we have to get some perspective outside of that story. And to do that, we need somebody else, a coworker, a friend, a boss, a family member, that can help ask us, well, what are our hopes? Why are they important to us? What are the opportunities we'd like? Just asking those questions stimulates fresh thinking that people wouldn't get all on their own. And we can see here, this is on the next slide, the results of having such a conversation that takes about 45 minutes or so around these topics is being useful and actually resulting in breakthroughs for 10% of the population. This is across cultures. This is Asians, Europeans, South Americans, North Americans, people from Australia and other places around the world. So we have a great opportunity to stimulate each other's thinking and to promote effective results. And this conversation is the start of it and a way to make that happen. And that's the catalyst. That's the thing that springs us forward. And Lon, do you have a good translation for catalyst for us that you think would help? Anything in Vietnamese that would be useful?
Lon might be on mute right now.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
yeah, so
All right. Well, we'll just
sh
uh,
she'll jump in a sec.
go
But
for
Hello?
it.
I was gonna
Yes.
ask you a question
Hello,
after
you
Lon
hear me now?
finishes. Yes, we hear
Yes.
you.
Hi.
Okay, yeah. Catalyst, I would say it's like chất vật yếu tố xúc tác. Một cái điều xúc tác.
It's a
You
long
understand me,
word.
Don?
Uh,
Okay,
partially.
would you write that in the chat box so we can have the right spelling on that?
Yeah, you can send it
You
out to
know what?
everybody.
I don't have the accent here. You know, the Vietnamese accent. I don't think I have it here.
So we
Right.
also say a catalyst is like a spark. Is that the same
Yeah,
same
yeah,
idea,
Absolutely right.
Lon?
exactly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay, like a spark. And Don, I was going to ask you how can you find a talent catalyst? That question came in as well. How
Ah,
can you find somebody to be your talent catalyst?
sure. Well, there's a talent catalyst needs to do just a few things. They need to be what we call a generous listener. That is somebody who's willing to listen to you without an agenda that they have of trying to make you do something or have a preset outcome. So they have to be open-minded. They need to be able to reflect back what they hear you saying, kind of like a mirror, because the mirror enables people to see their thinking, hear their thinking in a new and different way, just like a mirror helps us see ourselves when we can't see ourselves fully without one. And they need to be holding forth what that person's hopes are for themselves. So they're on that person's agenda, not on their own personal agenda. So those are the things that a talent catalyst does, and anyone who's willing to do those things can just follow the outline of the questions in a talent catalyst conversation, and they can be that with and for one another. So this is the first key. I want to be sure to spend some time on the second key, which is where most of the you, or at least a good majority of you, were talking about, and that is how do you accelerate through obstacles? And I loved being on the Mekong and early in the morning, seeing the people on the barges, and seeing people on the barges. Of course, the Vietnamese never miss an opportunity for commerce. So the industrious folks on the barges going across to work on the mainland would be selling things. So they were making money even while they were otherwise burning time going across the river. So this is part of the theme of what I want to share with you here of how can we make obstacles into opportunities. So let's look at the some ideas on this. And there are actually 15 different tools for turning obstacles into opportunities. I'm just going to talk with you about one of them, which is about using resources effectively. Many of us across cultures, and we found this over and over, don't make the most use that we could of the resources that we have. So one thing that we do is we invite people to write down all the resources that they have and to add to that list over time. The 100 resource challenge we mentioned is that if people do that after getting down 100 different resources, they probably will have accomplished their goal because they will become aware of all those resources. But the key thing is not just how many resources they have, but how much are they using of them. So many people find that they're only using maybe 10, 15, 20% of a particular resource. That resource could be a particular person, it could be a place, it could be a thing, it could be something that's available to them to advance their career. But they're not really stepping out and asking people to help them as much as they might. They're not taking advantage of those opportunities as fully as they could. And if you just start thinking practically about that and fill in a chart like this, you'll start to see new opportunities. Now, the thing that's really hot in Silicon Valley right now is what you see on the next slide, and it's all about what they call mashups. If you look in the world of software development, no one really develops software anymore from scratch, just writing lines of code. They take bits, apps, widgets, etc., little pieces of code that have been used for other purposes, and they put them together in new ways. You can do that for yourself and for your talent. You can, like this person, who happened to be an Asian person in the group from Accenture, worldwide work team across 13 different locations around the globe. And this person wanted to add value to the organization, do a great job for the company, and keep a work-life balance. So she thought about, well, what were some of her resources? Well, she's got a daily organizer. She's got some options on what gets offshored versus onshored in terms of work. And she's got a technical job where she's got to think about tax and immigration issues, and she's got some summary of those. So she then thought, well, how could she take those different resources together and help herself add more value and keep a work-life balance? And this is what she came up with. So this is the kind of thing that you can do, and you can do it best and most effectively with a talent catalyst, somebody who can help you and be available to bounce your thinking off of and to share new ideas. So let me just wrap up here because we want to be sure to give good time to Jennifer.
Well, I did want to jump in here for a second, Don. I love the idea of your mashup applied to work-life balance, and I think from my experience in working with Vietnamese people, they work, as you say, commerce is a focus, and there's many different entrepreneurial ventures they're involved in. So I think this would be helpful not just to Vietnamese emerging leaders, but also to all of us. And I love your idea here. I think it's a real winner in terms of the mashup idea. I wonder also if you would suggest to this young woman that she bring in somebody who's had experience in handling work-life balance issues, a mentor per se. Would that be a suggestion you might have?
Oh, sure, that'd be a great idea, Jennifer. And that's one of the things that people often overlook. We sort of take on these tasks and we just feel like we've got to handle it ourselves, and we don't access all the people and resources like the ones you're mentioning that could really be helpful to us. And people who are very successful are the ones that have figured out how to reach out to others to help them be successful.
I'd love to thank you for that. And Lon, I'd love to get I know you were excited about this mashup idea too. And what relevance do you see here to particularly people who are growing their careers in Vietnam? How does this idea resonate with you, with the mashup? And you need to make sure you unmute yourself there.
You hear me?
Yes, I do.
Yes, do you hear me? Yeah,
yes.
I would like to hear Don to go a little bit further, and I will have a few questions for him later.
Okay. Well, I think he's done on this part, right? I was just curious on the mashup part.
We just have a few more slides to go on this section.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I was thinking about you, Lon, as somebody who juggles a lot. You know, it really struck me, and you as an example of a woman who works and has young children, and you know, I thought about you in looking at this slide, right?
Yeah. He's speaking to me, Don. You are.
He's speaking to you and to many, not just women, but young people today. Would you agree?
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, I told you the other day that I love Don's mashup model.
I know. That's why I was saying. Now that I see it in the flesh, I love it. So I hope all of our folks out there as well love it. So Don, you had some other things to share, and I know Lon, you had a question for Don regarding that. So we'll let you proceed.
Okay, so if we move on to the third key then, so having powered up your talent story by guiding a good perspective on where you are and what you can do, having accelerated through your obstacles, and now the issue is what are you going to make of all that? And so that's where key number 3 comes in, and that's to multiply the benefits for yourself and others. And this is a wonderful dragon bridge in Da Nang. If you think of Da Nang, which is sort of ground zero in the unfortunate war, today it's roaring back, and this bridge is a physical demonstration of the power of people and resources, including funds from overseas, to rebuild and to create tangible opportunities and benefits for the community, which is part of this theme. So that leads us to the next slide here, which is around how do you create such tangible assets. Well, one thing is you have a brand, and I'd invite each of you to think about what is your brand. The classic definition of a brand is a promise that creates a preference for you. What is it about you that enables you to stand out? Now that sort of runs, I know, a little counter to the collective notion that Lon was highlighting, but you know, maybe it's a brand for your work group. Maybe it's a brand for your company, something that you stand for. And then how are you going to provide some tangible evidence of delivering on that promise? And then how can that create opportunities for you and others? When you think about and use this, equation here, you'll be opening up tremendous opportunity for you to spring forward in any career that you're in, whether it be in the workplace, it be something that you're doing in retirement or wherever else. And it really leads to Google's great philosophy, which is to have everyone be a learner and a teacher. And we see that on the next slide. So Google wants everybody to be a learner and everyone to be a teacher. So it's not just that learners are the young and unwashed and the teachers are the old and experienced. It's that everybody is teaching as a way to enhance their own learning. So what happens when you put these three keys together and put this into practice? And I want to share with you the results that we have on the next slide that highlight how this actually worked out for the team at Accenture with people from around the world. They actually had a 20% increase in the team's use of talent and a 13% increase in the team's level of satisfaction. So these things actually pay off. And I'll just round out here. The whole issue here is about action. So we'll open up the next poll and see how that comes across. I don't know if that's going to give you a chance to check off more than one or only one. We'll see how that got loaded up. But it looks like it's only select one and only a few items there. But let's just see what people have to say about that and any other questions that might come along while we're waiting to see what people would like to highlight in their commentary.
Yeah, we're covering a lot of content tonight, Don and Lon and everybody, and so we really want you to encourage you even to just take one step will be huge if you can use this material in a very practical way. That's our real hope with this seminar tonight, as far as growing your career and becoming the hero of your career in Vietnam. And so that's why a poll like this will be interesting to see where people are. So yeah, and I think I'm thinking about that for myself right now. You know, what's the next step for each of us as we keep our careers moving forward?
So we can probably see how the polling results turn out here.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll close that poll now. Ah.
Oh, great. Well, I'm really delighted that people are very focused on transforming their talent into tangible assets. That's ultimately the coin of the realm. The talent catalyst conversation, accelerating through obstacles are all steps to help people get to a place where they can make something tangible, concrete, and valuable that will help them in their career and that will help their organization because they can share that asset with others. So it could be an asset like a process, it could be a new approach to doing something, it could be something that you've learned that you want to share with other people. There are many ways to make things tangible, and that's great that you're all focused on that. So on the last slide in my section, I just wanted to highlight that if these issues are of interest to you, there's a free introduction to the book at the website. So you can read that for free and see lots of information and also some stories and illustrations from teams around the world that are putting these ideas into practice. So, Cảm ơn. Thank you.
Excellent, Don.
Appreciate your
Excellent.
Opportunity to be with you, and I just love Vietnam, and I'm so thankful that we've had a chance to communicate with you and share perspectives. So I'd like to be sure to move on and give full time here to Jennifer Kahnweiler. So if we go to the next slide for Jennifer, please.
And I'd love to get some more questions in. So don't be shy and feel free to ask questions and make comments. We had some people saying on here the correct spelling of the word talent catalyst, so we appreciate that. We'll share that with you, Lon. I think you may see that in the comments.
Where is it?
So it's fun to translate some of this business jargon right into Vietnamese when it doesn't always translate very easily, does it? So, okay, well, I'm going to let Don introduce me then rather
Yeah.
than introduce myself, because that would be kind of not very Vietnamese, would it?
Right. Yeah, well, Jennifer Kahnweiler has a Ph.D. She's a certified speaking professional. She's an author and international speaker, and as you can hear this evening, very talented in that. She's hailed as a champion for introverts with her best-selling books, The Introverted Leader and Quiet Influence, that have sold over 60,000 copies and have been translated into 11 languages. And her clients include GE, NASA, and she's been at the U.S. Embassy in Vietnam and the Vietnam Education Foundation. And most of all, Jennifer was really the spark plug in helping to pull this webinar together, and I'm very grateful to her for doing that. And Jennifer, eager to hear your message as always about cultural approaches to leadership and what people can do in quiet and effective ways.
Thank you so much, Don, and thank you everybody for joining us this evening and to listen to my piece here. I want to say also, like Don, I'm what you might call a Vietnamese junkie. So if I could turn to the next slide, you know, my theme is introverts, and I want to share with you some of the lessons learned that, in particular, introverts rock. I don't know if we say that in Vietnam, but you know, I think that probably translates the idea that introverts really are seeing more attention now, that people who recharge their batteries and need that time to recharge, who go within to process, to think things through, as opposed to folks who are bit more energized by the outside world, who don't need as much charging internally but go out in the world to be with people and develop relationships. Those are really the extroverts, and we have both kinds in the world, and many times they're on a sliding scale. We can be some of one and some of the other. But what I want to share with you in this session briefly is just some of the highlights about, first of all, who introverts are, what they're made of, some of the challenges they face, and what I found that successful introverted leaders do to really take charge in their organizations and in their careers. So on the next slide, you'll see a bit of background here and why my interest in Vietnam. I was fortunate enough and really honored in 2012 to be invited to speak at the U.S. Embassy's American Center in Hanoi. I had done a webinar, an online program, had thoroughly enjoyed it, and then had a chance to go with my husband Bill, and you can see him he's the only guy there in the picture with actually smiling, which you'll see later he doesn't smile very much, so that he was smiling with all those beautiful women. But one of the themes that I found, that both of us found, is not only when I spoke in the country, but when I traveled around the beautiful country of Vietnam, was the hope and the rebirth and the future in really symbolized in the education that was emphasized everywhere. And this was at a shrine that we were at, where folks grabbed us for the picture when they found out that we were both in the teaching field. In the next slide related to that, hunger for learning. This was a shot of one of the programs that I did at the embassy, and these kinds of sessions happen with me, but they happen with many folks who come and speak over in Vietnam. And those of you Vietnamese attendees who are on the session will probably attest to that. That people want to learn, and they want to learn about leadership too. The respect for leaders. The picture of the books on the next page will show you that there is a tremendous interest in learning and grabbing everything that people can about this art and science of leadership. And then the last theme that I want to emphasize here, that was so prevalent in my experience in travel in Vietnam and my learning from my dear friend Lon and others, is the entrepreneurial spirit. And the young man that I'm standing next to was my interpreter at that particular session, and some of you will recognize the national flower there, the lotus flower, which symbolizes a lot of purity and hope and commitment, hope for the future. And again, that's the theme. That was a plaque that was given to me that was hand done. It was just an incredible, magical experience, and I came away just so impressed with the country, with the people, and with the resilience, particularly in a country that has been through so much through its history. In the next slide, I just am emphasizing there the research that shows that no matter what country you're in, the breakdown is pretty even in terms of introverts and extroverts. And with that thought in mind, I'd like to throw our poll up there now, Kat, that asks people about, you know, who we have listening tonight or this morning. Where do you think you fall based on the descriptions that I gave earlier? Or do you think you're more of an introvert, or do you think you're more out there as an extrovert? And it's okay if you don't know, just take your best guess there. And then while those results are coming in, I'll ask Don and Lon, where do you guys fall on that spectrum?
What do you think about me,
Well,
Jennifer?
Now that's not fair. You asked me a question, you turned it around, Lon. So I'm going to ask you to say, where do you think you're more introverted or extroverted based on the description? See, Lon, you're demonstrating what you said earlier about asking questions.
Yeah, I feel like I'm more situational. I could be very extroverted when I'm in front of a big group of people. But, you know, I can be very introverted when I'm in my family and, you know, I want to be quiet. And, and I need my own, you know, space.
Yes. And I think one of the keys is how badly do you need that? You know, introverts really say if they don't have that time to be away and in solitude, it's very stressful to them.
Right.
So again, it's a matter of degree. So as you say, it could be certain situations.
Yeah.
And how about you, Don? Where are you on this?
Well, actually, you know, I've taken the Myers-Briggs test, and one of the things they have is introvert, extrovert.
Right.
I'm right in the middle of both of those.
Oh, okay. All right. So you're what they call ambidextrous, or some people call it an ambivert. Yes.
Jennifer, but I think that you know, if I have to give you one answer only, I think I thrive when I am in front of people. So I would say I am an extrovert.
Yeah, I would think you lean more towards that. So what do we got for the results there, Kat? I don't know if they've all come in yet, but we'll see where the group is tonight. Ah, look at that, folks. We have mostly introvert. Okay. Well, I'm very pleased to see that we also have some extroverts who have showed up as well. So, and by the way, webinars are great for introverts because you guys can think about them and you can contribute at your own pace. So let's talk a little bit more then about what makes up the introvert personality, or what really are the strengths rather than the personality. I did some research on quiet influence for the last book, and I found there were many strengths, but one of the main things is this picture really connotes here is the calmness. And I can only think about what Lon was describing in terms of the Vietnamese culture of the calmness, of the silence, of the pause, and it's very aligned with that. And so I think that's why there's quite an interest in the whole topic of introversion in that country. The quiet influence process, which is 2 slides past that, is just, I wanted to just share that with you because these were the strengths that I found really emerged from many people who make a difference, who provoke new thoughts, who challenge the status quo, who are true leaders in many senses of the word. These things like engaged listening and taking that quiet time that we were just discussing. The preparation is really critical. All of these things are what introverts and quiet influencers build on. In fact, I found that they were most effective when they didn't try to be like extroverts, but when they really built on their natural strengths. Introverts are leaders. There is no doubt about it. Now, who are some of those leaders? So let's take a look at some of those pictures on 2 slides, the next slide there. And you can see some people you may recognize, you know, like Albert Einstein and Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Facebook in the middle, Tony Hsieh. We have the company named Zappos that some of you guys might be familiar with. Up on the right-hand corner, I'm always pleased to see women introverted leaders rising up. We have the new CEO of General Motors, Mary Barra, who's a really strong introvert. And there's many, many, many more. In a survey that I did, introverts said that extroverts get ahead. Oh, by the way, that's Steve Wozniak. Some of you may know the other Steve, not Steve Jobs, but the person who really was behind the Apple development and emergence of Apple, and many people say was responsible for the whole transformation there. And Steve Wozniak is known as a quiet, introverted personality. We have a cartoon that comes up after the introverts get a head slide, and this was shared with me by one of our folks at Barrett Kohler, our publishing company, and I had to get a good laugh. Jeevan, who some of you know is an introvert, and he shared this with me, and I thought that was very appropriate because this really speaks to one of the key challenges that introverts have, and that is selling themselves. So we talk about many strengths that introverted leaders have, but yet they are faced in a society that is type A, and it's very aligned with what Lon was saying earlier about, you know, flexing and dealing with Western companies where it's expected that you sell yourself. The top 4 hard realities that you'll see listed in the next grid really focus on what are the big challenges that introverts face. And that 4th one, the undersell, is probably one of the biggest ones when you're trying to move your career forward. Another one is negative impressions, where people see the face that Lon was describing before, which doesn't show a lot of emotion. And unfortunately, because it doesn't, people make they get the wrong perception of what you're really expressing. So I have a picture here, back to husband Bill, who's one of the introverts in my life who I've learned so much from. And this is Bill when we laughed. It's the most he ever really smiles, except for that picture with the beautiful women before. And then the next one is after Bill won the lottery. Now, that's only a joke. He really didn't win the lottery, but this is about how excited he gets. He doesn't show a lot of emotion, and unfortunately that can lead to some confusion, particularly among students who he has before they get to know him. And so if that's you may be expressing, as Lon was saying, you might need to show a little bit more animation in your face. Lon, you want to jump on here? Would you agree that that's something that's important to do, to show expression?
I would encourage, especially for potential leaders, senior leaders, every of us, because our people mirror us, right? You are there. If you show your emotion, then you can magnify that, and you can even influence your people even more effectively. Because
Yes.
not everybody can read the nuances and all the subtleties. Not everybody can do that.
Exactly, and we did have another comment come in that was, while you're on the line, I'm gonna ask you this, and she said maybe most of the Vietnamese are too shy, and I think you were responding to that. What do you think about that? Are they too shy? And by the way, shy can be different than introversion, can it? Shy is about anxiety. It can really be debilitating. It can be psychological, but introverted is really how you're wired. It's just a natural way of being.
Right.
But what do you think about that question about, do you think they're too introverted?
I have just answered on the screen real quickly. Yeah, I don't think most Vietnamese are shy at all. As you said, thank you so much for your very precise explanation. Yeah, we are not shy. And I don't think I'm shy. But, we are hardwired to be reserved, to be very selective when we express ourselves. And, in some culture, I would say in some strict family, children are taught to be very emotionalist, like have a poker face, not to be too jumpy, expressive. It's not good. It's not a good thing. So we tend to be more reserved and subtle in expressing ourselves. It's not shy. It has nothing to do with being shy at all.
No, and in fact, there's a real place for doing that. Many effective leaders, one of their traits is to not show tremendous amounts of emotion. In fact, Ursula Burns, who's a very extroverted CEO at Xerox, learned that she needed to be the listener in chief, she called herself, because she was so expressive, Lon, in her face that people were reacting and not sharing their thoughts because of her face. So when she did exactly what you said, she got more information. Yeah, let's turn to the next slide, Kat, because I want to share the strategies that I found. We talked about some of the challenges, but the strategies and the approaches that I consistently have found in my work over the years with successful introverted leaders. And one of the key things they do, as I had mentioned earlier, is to prepare. But they don't just prepare for the project itself. They really prepare for the interaction that they're getting involved in. So for instance, you notice there are some examples in the right-hand top corner. Before they're doing a presentation, they will practice and slow down and breathe. I had a woman tell me that today, that that's what she does. She counts and breathes slowly, and then she's very calm before her presentation. So they consciously take these strategies to prepare, because they prepare very well, and they just use them to get themselves ready for situations like you described earlier, meetings, networking events, things where they might get anxious, and this is true for all of us. It helps to prepare. So they just really bring out that strength in a big way and make it work for them. The second one is that they are present. Once they prepare, then they are in the moment. They listen with attunement, they ask open-ended questions, and they are where their feet are. They are not worrying about the past, the present, and they really connect with people. A third thing that they do then is, as you also mentioned earlier, Lon, when you were suggesting that young Vietnamese leaders or emerging leaders also push themselves. I believe you said step out of their comfort zone, and I said yes. You know, that's the key, is to stretch ourselves every single day to try something that's not too far. I have a yoga teacher who said, you know, push so it's just enough, you know, but not too little. So you have to stretch, but so it's a doable kind of a stretch. So maybe for you it's speaking up once in a meeting, or perhaps it's using humor, letting the true side, the funny side of yourself come out more at work, and allow you to be more transparent to people so they can get to know you. Whatever for you is the push that you need to do. And in the book Introverted Leader, I have a whole process for how you can do that, as well as in Quiet Influence, the other one. And then finally, practice, and you talked about that, Lon, too, and as being a real good strategy to cross the cultural barrier, and I believe Don did as well, is to continue to practice. And those were some examples of how you can get better. And you know, if it is rehearsal, where, you know, before this webinar today, we went over it, we rehearsed it. A friend of mine, David, says rehearsal is the art of experimentation. Rehearsal is the art of experimentation. You try it a different way each time, and you get more confident as time goes on. And I think a wonderful example is in our next slide of the people who I think a lot of us admire. Excuse me, the famous group, the Beatles, who actually, according to Malcolm Gladwell in his book Outliers, excuse me, talked about practice, practice, practice. They went over to Germany and refined their art, spent several years, and emerged. They weren't even called the Beatles back then. I believe they were called the Quarrymen. And they came out into the world and announced themselves as the Beatles, and they were at the top of their game. So we may not all be the Beatles, but we can certainly be at the top of our game and increasingly work on our own leadership and experience success and satisfaction if we do that. And I firmly believe that the solution to many of the world's problems could very well lie with introverts. So in organizations and as individuals, we really need to listen to the introverts in our midst. So the solution to the global warming problem, as you see here on the next one, the sign of global warming, might very well and could very well lay in the brains of an introvert, an introverted leader, or perhaps the cure to world hunger will lie in the brains and the heart and the mind of an introverted leader. And finally, the cure for cancer. Any of those big world problems, and also the challenges that you're facing and that your organizations are facing to keep themselves competitive, very well could lie in the brains and the hearts and the minds of introverts, who make up at least half the population. So we all need to listen to the introverts in our midst. And I hope each one of you will do that and listen to yourself and believe in yourself if you are one of the 73% who are on the call tonight. So I think we have a couple of other questions. It's been just such a pleasure and an honor to work with Don and Lan and the whole team on sharing some ideas and connecting them with what's going on in Vietnam, this exciting, fast-growing economy with the challenges that it has. So let's open it up maybe to some questions as well as I'd like to hear from Don and Lan if you have any, and some that have been coming in.
Well, Jennifer, let me pick up on a listener's question for you,
Sure.
which is, what is your advice for us to become a good leader? Should they be more introverted or more extroverted, or a balance between them, or it depends on the situation? How do you guide people to be their most effective self in a leadership situation?
That's a great question, and I think it's a sum of all the above. If I can answer in that way, I think it is not one size fits all. It's about, and I wouldn't get too caught up in labels. It's about behaviors. I'd ask myself the question, what's working for me? In my organization or in the career path that I'm setting forth? Is it important for me to become better at, speaking up? Or maybe it's even a question of me listening more. Maybe I need to be quiet more. So it's going to depend on behaviors and the situation, but it's also important for you to know yourself. And so if you are more on the introverted side, not to be ashamed of that, to be very proud of it, and to look at how you can take that strength and use it and ramp it up even in a more impactful way, particularly in those areas where you are more challenged. So I'd really encourage you to start with yourself and then focus on behavior.
Okay, one other question that people are dying to know the answer to is, where are you on the introverted, extroverted scale?
Well, actually, Don, I know you know.
And what motivated you to champion the introvert?
Well, I'm actually an extrovert, and I call myself, as a champion of introverts. There have been a few influences, major ones in my life. One of them you saw here was my husband of 40 years plus. And it also was my dad. Now, my dad was a slight introvert. He was an amazing listener. And I learned the power of listening early on. As I started to get work and moving in and out of organizations, I was always struck on by the fact that the quieter people in the groups that I was in seemed to be overlooked, ignored, misunderstood, and they would be quite frustrated. And when I was coaching them, I would be struck by this time and time again. And so that led me into really looking at the question, are there introverts who are leaders? And I was extremely pleased to find out that it was the case in a very strong way. So that started me on the journey, and then I realized that there were many introverts who didn't have a voice, and our organizations really needed to tap into them. So that got me very excited, and I'm actually working now on a book on introverts and extroverts and how they work together. So that'll be my perspective from how I was raised and grew up, from that extrovert perspective. But thank you for that question.
Well, great. And in a moment, I want to be sure that Lon is asking a question or having an opportunity to make a comment here. But I just wanted to say that I think, Jennifer, you have modeled the theme of these workshops, which is a world that works for all. Which is what Barrett Kohler and the authors of Barrett Kohler and the people that are attracted to Barrett Kohler are about, which is, making the world work for all, even if that's not in our own immediate self-interest. And you're a great model of doing that for people who are introverts when you yourself is an extrovert.
Well, thank you very much.
That's wonderful.
Thank you very much. And I think it's come on. Is that right, Lon? Come on?
Yes.
All right. It's close enough, right?
Yes, very good. Jennifer, I have seen a lot, not a lot, but a few questions that I didn't have a chance to answer, and I think you have one or two questions that you haven't addressed yet. So before we forget, I would just say that because of the time limitation, and we apologize that we didn't have a chance to get to them, But if you could email me or Jennifer or Don if you have any particular question for us,
Yes.
please do so. We are more than happy to answer your questions, and we apologize that we didn't have a chance to answer them all.
Yes, and I'd like to address the question. I absolutely agree that please contact us. We would love to hear from you. And what is your next action? I'd like, if you would take just we have a very short time left, but just take 30 seconds or so to just put in the box. What is your next action? Was there something that you heard today from our discussion about becoming the hero of your career in Vietnam that will stick with you, or a takeaway that you'd like to share with us? Please let us know now, and as we're finishing up the program, we would love to hear from you. And we know that that people have been listening because we've been getting some great comments. It's been really a thrill and a pleasure to talk with you tonight and this morning.
And I know we want to go to the next slide so that people can see what the next webinar in this series is going to be about, which is our
you
colleagues,
for that. Yes,
Reynolds and Michael Prince.
Exactly, and we will be, because you guys are on the list, you will be hearing from us with the dates on the next webinar, and that will be a very exciting webinar based out of Singapore, and it's going to be on leadership. So definitely stay tuned for that one. And oh wow, I'm looking at some of these questions, so they're terrific. So just in summary, I just want to thank everybody for taking the extra time out of your busy days and busy evenings to share with us these and listen to us as we talked about some of the ideas related to careers and leadership in Vietnam. And we hope that we spark some thoughts from you and some questions, and that you are motivated to take a step tomorrow in the right direction. So on behalf of my whole team, I think that we're going to all say good night or goodbye in Vietnamese. Lon, is that, you're going to lead us in that?
Xin chào tạm biệt. Xin tạm
Say it louder, sorry.
Xin chào tạm biệt.
Xin chào tạm biệt.
Xin chào tạm biệt. And
yeah, cảm ơn rất nhiều.
Come on, review. Okay, we can copy you, and even though we don't know what it means, you'll teach us, and you'll all teach us. And thank you all for being part of our global community. And have a wonderful rest of the day and evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.